Okay. And to start, we would like to acknowledge that we are on land of the native and traditional people that live here before we arrived, and some still live here, and we honor them. So I don't really have anything else to say about elections. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box and we will get started. And I think we'll save the questions till the end unless each presenter wants to take them during their speech, but let's hold them and we'll put them on at the end. And I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone, and you can unmute yourselves as necessary.
Are you on? Oh.
Okay, Joan, go ahead.
Thank you, Deb. Our first speaker today is Maggie Bush, who is going to share Get Out the Vote practices with us. Maggie is the Programs and Outreach Director for the League of Women Voters of the United States and has more than a decade of political advocacy and strategic communications experience. She currently manages the League's nationwide voter registration programs, which have resulted in hundreds of thousands of voters registered in major election years. She has authored several publications and training manuals related to voting rights, voter registration, and youth voter engagement. Maggie regularly provides voter engagement training to volunteer activists and allied partners nationwide. And she's also a member of the League of Women Voters of Arlington. So Maggie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joan. Good morning, everybody. Just want to make sure people can hear me okay. Great. Yes, I was a longtime member of the Arlington League board, and I'm still a proud supporter of everything the League is doing. As I said to Joan in a training last week, you couldn't miss the League of Women Voters of Arlington if you tried right now, because they are at every farmer's market, in every condo building, at every stoplight, it feels like, encouraging get out the vote. So it's been incredible to see in my own neighborhood, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all this morning. Thank you, everyone, for getting up early to talk about voting. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Joan, can you give me a thumbs up if everybody can see okay?
You're good, Maggie.
Great. Okay. So as Joan said, I'm going to talk about Get Out the Vote best practices a little bit this morning and have lots of time to hear from you all about not only what you're doing and hopefully sharing with one another, but also what challenges you see, not just this year, which is chock full of challenges for reaching voters, but kind of thinking about the future and where you go from here. So I'm going to talk about some of what the research tells us, both our own League research, some of it conducted in Virginia and around the country, some of the top things that we're really encouraging League activists to prioritize given COVID. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about a few other kind of relevant updates from LWV-US about what we're worried about, what we're thinking about, and some of the other work going on around the country that I thought would be important for people to know. So first, I just want to take a minute and ask people to just mention in the chat box quickly, what are you doing right now to get out the vote? Let's just hear from a few people. All right, so Ann Murphy says postcards. Carolyn says Facebook, caravans, Post-it notes on doors. Julia, that's something that Arlington is also doing. I'm not sure where you are in the state, but church lectures, stickers on the doors of low-income voters, partnering with Virginia Tech to do student registration. Awesome, that's all incredible stuff. These are great church bulletins. these are great examples and exactly some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Flyers at the food pantry. So flyers in the bags going directly into the homes of people that we know are likely to be affected by lack of good information about voting. Great, you all have 1,000 ideas. I hope you can see each other's chats and get some ideas if you are still looking for activities. What a great start for this. So, so when we talk about get out the vote, what we're really talking about is direct voter contact. So directly reaching voters and talking to them about voting. What we're not talking about is some of the other important, but sort of less measurable work that the league does. So when I'm talking today, we're not really talking about that flyer that you put up in the library or at the stoplight. Those things are important too and incredible reminders, but we're really going to focus our conversation on how we can directly reach voters, because we know that's really what we need to be doing more of as an organization and what we know really works. So research repeatedly demonstrates that direct voter contact, so I'm talking about the people who call you on the phone and the people who leave a post-it at your door or send you a postcard or even knock on your door, although there's probably less of that going on this year, that can show a demonstrable impact on turnout. There's a reason that campaigns and groups like the League invest tons and tons of money into this work. It's because it's effective. Get out the vote efforts have shown up to a double-digit increase in turnout, especially in local elections where there doesn't tend to be a lot of awareness about those elections in the community. And our small local efforts can really make a huge difference, especially among turning out underrepresented groups of voters. It also helps us leverage the investments we're already making. So many of you, if I asked you to raise your hands, many of you have helped be part of the Vote 411 system by conducting those candidate questionnaires and asking candidates to respond. Many of you have, probably all of you, have been out there at a voter registration table for the League, registering new people to vote. You've been part of the hundreds of hours of volunteer time it takes to develop voters' guides and host debates and protect the vote across Virginia. And so by doing direct voter outreach, by actually leaving the Vote 411 name and link on a voter's door or in their voicemail, it helps us leverage the huge investments, the people investments and the money investments that we're making in all these other programs. It makes sure that the people who really need our resources actually get it and actually turn out to vote. And as we're seeing, especially during COVID, it's a huge opportunity to involve people who wouldn't potentially always be a League member. So I know Joan here in Arlington and many of you all too have found a way to engage people who do or don't want to leave their house right now. The Arlington League has done, and again, I only know that because it's my home league. I'm sure you all are doing great work as well, but the Arlington League will send out emails, feels like about weekly, saying there's opportunities to do work from your computer, and here are the opportunities to do the work, on your feet, out in the community. And here's where you go to sign up, and we're gonna make it simple and easy for you. I just got an email this morning from the Phoenix, Arizona League that is also doing that. They have put together postcard packets that people can purchase at a bulk cost and sit at their house and write postcards to voters who are less likely to participate this year. They're making it easy, and this get out the vote work is something that people, whether or not they're a League member, can really take up and be part of. They can give an hour or 100 hours to this kind of work, and it's absolutely something that we want to build out and increase as the League works to evolve and bring in new people and people who want to get involved in different kinds of ways with us. As I mentioned, the 3 known most effective ways to do get out the vote based on all the research is mailing, live phone calls to voters, and then door knocking or canvassing. So most of what we are doing, we being the National League, as well as most of the leagues that I'm aware of, it does fall into that mailing category, although as several of you just said in the chat, you are doing other things as well. You're doing some phone calls, hopefully to voters that you've registered. you're doing some door knocking and canvassing. All of these things, all of these tactics have shown in multiple studies to actually increase voter turnout. So this could go on forever, I know, but if everyone could just take a minute and say, how has the current environment affected your plans? Clearly, none of our work looks how we thought it would at the beginning of this year. And maybe if you have a thought of even how has it opened up some opportunities for you in unexpected ways? Okay, so Sarah says, we can't hand out literature. Absolutely, which is a huge thing of part of what we've done. Carolyn says we lost the ability to talk to high school students. Yes, that is a particular pain point for me personally. I manage the league's nationwide high school voter registration program that many of your leagues have been part of over the years. And leagues, we're planning to be in 1,000 high schools this past spring to register voters. Obviously that didn't happen. And that was, very, very hard for many of us to cope with. So of course, limited in-person opportunities. But okay, so Joan says, however, we were able to do virtual webinars to places of worship, appointments, and apartments probably, and civic associations. Anne says, I'm wearing a mask that says vote. Yes. Can't do voter registration at tables and colleges, right? But Carolyn is saying we are having bigger program attendance by non-members, and virtual is helping us be creative and reach more people. These are all such great solutions. Yeah, I think certainly at the National League, we've also experienced all of these things, and many, many leagues around the country are figuring out what to do, and in some ways even reaching more people. Just a quick anecdote, Vote 411 has already received double the traffic at this point in the year than we had at this point in 2016, which just goes to show you how much interest there is, how much people are really figuring out where to get the information they need to be able to vote. Oh, you sent a voter registration PowerPoint to all high school teachers in the state. That's incredible, Joan. I didn't know that. Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. And again, I hope you got some ideas from each other there about maybe things you could be trying. I think you all probably know this, but just to put a fine point on it, in terms of what to really focus in on now with these last critical weeks remaining. Vote 411 is the place to get trusted, up-to-date information, whether you're talking to Virginia voters, people right in your community, or the people in your life who live all over the country. The Vote 411 team is updating that site around the clock, 7 days a week. We are on call to be making sure any voting changes that happen, and there still will be changes across the country, right, are up to date in bilingual. Hopefully folks saw that Vote 411 is also launched fully in Spanish now for the first time this year, which we're really excited about. We are updating that site around the clock to make sure it has the right information. That will be critically important as we move into October, where we know that problems are going to happen with polling places. Polling places will change, and we'll need to get the word out really, really quickly in particular states. We saw that around the primaries. Information about deadlines and when ballots need to be dropped. That will still change between now and Election Day, unfortunately, and that causes a lot of voter confusion. So we hope that you're all continuously pointing back to Vote 411 as the best national resource for this. Again, thinking about what remaining ways might you do direct outreach to individual voters. So how might you still get your hands on a list of voters and reach out to them in these last critical weeks? And we have a couple specific things that you all can do with the support of the State League on that. We're encouraging voters to act now. I think you all are doing this already, but we use the traditional wisdom was always to do our biggest push of voter engagement and get out the vote right before Election Day, because that's when voters really keyed in and were ready to act. It used to be Halloween weekend was the weekend to be doing all of our door knocking and phone banking. Clearly that's different this year. We want everyone to act now. Luckily here in Virginia, as you all know, anyone is able to request that ballot right now. We're going to start seeing those ballots, I think, next week, right? And so we want everyone to get them in. I'm curious, by a show of hands, who received the Postal Service postcard yesterday? Anybody? So what we've heard and what we've done an informal poll among staff at the national office is that the Postal Service is sending out a mailer, I think, to everyone in the country, is what we're able to find out so far, to tell them about their voting options, set some recommendations, and encourage people to act now. So we are really thrilled to see that action on the behalf of the post office, especially given how the last few weeks have looked with that. We're really encouraged by that. We want to be helping to echo that and making sure people are acting now. That is just the most important message. And again, thinking about who might not have good access to information, who might not have internet access in your area, or good information about how mail-in voting works. Oh, someone's going to show us the postcard. Marie's got it right there. Yes. I hope you can see it. That looks just like the one I got yesterday in Arlington, Marie. You know, where are those communities, and how might you creatively tap in and remind them to vote, or help get them good access to information? And again, I hate to pick on Joan over and over, but she has some really great specific examples of how they've done that here in the Northern Virginia area. So to talk about how we're investing in this, I will say that LWV-VA, so our 501c3 organization. I want to remind everyone to mute if you're enjoying your morning coffee or anything. Thank you. We are investing more than 3 times, probably more than 5 times what we've ever invested in this before in terms of supporting state and local leagues and their get out the vote activities. We're sending 1.75 million mailers to voters, starting the first week of October and running through about the 3rd week of October, in 15 states, including 100,000 postcards in Virginia that we have paid for, and I'll talk about that in a minute, to underrepresented groups of voters, primarily women, and encouraging them to vote and to go to Vote 411. We are so excited that this is something that the national board and the delegates of convention have prioritized for us and provided funding for. And it's also something that increasingly we are able to receive external foundation grant funding to do, because we're showing that it works and that we have a solid plan in place. We're able to do post-election analysis, and I'll talk about how that works, but we're actually able to measure our impact by the numbers, and that makes it even easier to raise additional support to do this. We also even have the support of a few corporate partners in some states in doing this work. Separate from what we're investing in terms of dollars at the national level, we're providing training and support for every league in the country. So hopefully some of you have been part of those webinars that our team is doing every other week, talking about how to do effective get out the vote and all kinds of other activities. We're incorporating get out the vote into every grant that we offer to make sure that this is something that leagues are equipped to do and have good information about. And we have a get out the vote toolkit that was recently updated to include specific COVID related tips that I hope you all have maybe had the chance to see. And we'll be continuing to build this out in the future as well. So here's an example. Here's the postcard in Virginia. There's 100,000 of these going out. They'll hit mailboxes by October 10th. It encourages people to go to Vote 411, as you see, and it has the league's information, the Virginia League's information there. And I thank Deb, especially for her partnership in this. Deb and I have worked together on these for several election cycles now, since we are one of the states that has elections all the time. So we've been able to pilot some of these in primary years, as well as on Super Tuesday, we did a mailing of 100,000 voters in Virginia, and these will be going out in October. Again, to women under 45, mostly in the southern part of the state. So I wanted to just show a quick case study of the impact that we saw from one of these mailing operations in 2019. And then I'll also talk about some of the data we have out of Virginia as well. So we did this for the first time in the New Jersey state legislative primary elections in 2019. We sent 35,000 postcards, and we also recruited 60 New Jersey League volunteers to do live phone banking to voters as well. About 20 or 30 of the volunteers ended up really participating in earnest, and they together successfully phone banked and reached over 700 voters in the state. So in that case, we were targeting registered voters under 45 because it was a pretty low interest state primary, state legislative primary. We targeted people who had voted previously and only focused this work in a couple of state legislative districts that were actually contested and that had kind of a lot of interest in them. After the fact, we were able to compare the turnout of the people we spoke to and mailed to against a control group of people who demographically looked exactly the same. And this was done through the VAN system, which hopefully some of you are familiar with and which we're going to talk about in a minute. That's how we're able to do this kind of post-analysis to see the turnout. And we were able to measure, okay, how did people who received a postcard from the league do in terms of turnout versus people who demographically and geographically look the same as them, but did not hear from us. So this looks depressing, but there's good news here. So the statewide turnout in that primary was 7.7%, which, believe it or not, was way higher than it had been previously in previous similar election years. So that was actually a win, believe it or not. The turnout for our control group, so again, this was underrepresented voters, but they did not hear from the league. Their turnout was expectedly lower at 6.3%. If the voter heard one contact from the league, so in this case a postcard, they turned out at 6.9%. And then if they got two contacts from the league, so a phone call and a postcard, a live phone call from a volunteer, they turned out at a rate of 7.3%. So you go from 6.3 to 7.3. That seems, again, that doesn't look all that big, but when you're talking about only a 7.7% turnout for the whole state, that's actually a huge deal. And this is the kind of thing that funders look at and are really impressed by. So, you know, this was the first indication when we first ran this pilot that this was something that was relatively low barrier for us to do and something that we really wanted to invest in more widely. And then every single time since then that we have run these experiments, we've had similar results, including in the 2019 general election in several states, as well as on Super Tuesday in the 2020 primary. So in the 2020 primary in March, we did 3 Super Tuesday states, including Virginia. We targeted 300,000 voters, including 100,000 in Virginia, where we sent postcards to women under 45 in the areas of the state with a history of racial gerrymandering, lower turnout, or, you know, where we've seen voting issues in the past. And if you have specific questions about where that was, maybe Deb remembers better than me exactly where we targeted this. So the results for Super Tuesday were that, again, voters who heard from the league turned out at a rate 0.2% higher than those who did not. And again, that doesn't look all that big, but it's actually a big deal. And it's an even bigger deal that we're able to have this kind of specific data to point to in terms of our impact. Now, the bigger the election, the smaller the demonstrable impact you're able to see with a relatively, you know, small investment like this, everything being equal. So in the fall, we would expect that we're not going to be able to measure a full percentage point turnout higher, most likely in the states where we're doing this, because there's just so much emphasis and noise and attention being paid to voters. It becomes much more difficult to identify and isolate which is the variable that really helps that voter turnout. But as the more state level and local races show, in a small local race, so thinking ahead to the elections next year in Virginia, where we'll be only one of a couple states who even have elections, our impact can really be huge and measurable, especially when we target in on specific geographic areas and specific groups of voters. I hope that makes sense. So I want to ask now, just again, for people to type a few thoughts into the chat of what do you think is holding us back? So maybe that's the global us as the league, or just thinking about your own local league. What are our biggest barriers to doing some of this work? Volunteer burnout. Yep, that's a very real thing, Allison. Absolutely. Disinformation, and then I think, as Marianne says, disinformation about voting, and then Patricia has the sort of counterpoint of waiting for accurate voting information, right? Especially when the information is changing all the time. That's a huge barrier. I can certainly echo that. You know, I managed this process for our 15 states, and we just finished that project up this past week. We had to change those postcards in every single state multiple times because there's so much going on and so many changes happening in the state about what voters need to know. And that's very stressful. You want to put the right information out to voters. And when you're dealing with things like mailing deadlines and timelines, you might not know, right, what changes might happen 2 weeks from now that render your postcard inaccurate all of a sudden. League demographics, we are older. Yes, I think clearly we know one of the reasons that we're prioritizing this and talking about it a lot is because this is not something that the traditional league volunteer has done a lot of. There's even some reticence sometimes in talking about this as the kind of thing the league should be doing, but it's just so important, and it's critical to our fulfilling our mission of serving voters. Too much to do, of course, Deb, absolutely. Too much to do. It's hard to be thinking about what we might do in November when there's so much right in front of us right now. Yeah. And then, yeah, it is hard. Beth says it's hard to contact voters through the phone bank. There is some cost involved. There is some data involved in getting access to these lists of voters. And that, again, is something that not a lot of leagues traditionally have had experience with, but more and more leagues are doing that. Well, thanks everyone for sharing. I think those are all absolutely the barriers that I think about every day. So you've hit the nail on the head there. So here's the good news. There's a few more things we can all do right now. And I want to, again, I think you all have given each other some ideas, but here's a few more. Hopefully you're getting some ideas in the chat. Hopefully we have some time to talk about this at the end. I think we will. We can tap into the VAN database. So Joan, jump in if I'm inaccurate, but the state league has access to the Voter Activation Network, which is a nonprofit national version of the voter file. Many state leagues, like in Virginia, have access to this through state coalition partners and are able to pull lists of voters. This is how we're doing all of the mailings across the 15 states. This is also how many local leagues around the country are doing their own voter contact work. So I believe Joan is still able to pull lists of even unregistered voters in your area for you if you have volunteers who would like to do some of that contact before the deadline on the 13th, or to voters who are registered, between then and election day. Joan says yes, great. So Joan can help you with that. She wants to help you with that. She wants to share the knowledge of how the Arlington League has done that successfully. And I have some stats about what they've done in a minute, I think. I also heard that Deb is in the Fairfax area getting her hands on lists of absentee ballot requests and following up with those people. So Deb, I don't know if you want to put in the chat or jump in at some point and talk about what that is looking like and how other leagues can think about doing that. But that's a great idea and something to absolutely think about doing. And Deb says she can also get access to training on how the VAN works. So these are things that really, once you do it the first time, gets much simpler. Do most league members writing postcards provide their own postage? I've seen both. I've seen, things where the league is able to pay for up to a certain amount based on funding that they have in place. And then in other places I do see where people are asking whether it's league members or other volunteers to pay some of the postage cost. I think in Joan's case, you did some of each. Is that right? You did sort of a hybrid, Joan? She'll
Yeah,
type in the chat.
We did, yeah. We paid for the ones that went to Arlington, but when people did reclaim the vote, they paid for that because it wasn't in Arlington.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, to the extent that our leagues can pay for this, we want to be able to do that. This is also, as I said, a great thing thinking to future elections. I know it's hard to think about future elections right now, but this is a great thing to ask businesses, individual donors to write. If you're applying for a grant from me, from the National League, write these costs into those grant applications and we will pay for it. And other volunteers and people in your community want to donate and pay. It's a great thing to say, you know, if you give us a $50 donation, we'll be able to pay for, you know, 50 stamps plus a run of postcards or whatever the case is. Okay, so again, if you want to still contact voters, whether it's 15 voters or 1,500 voters, depending on what your local league is up to, or if you want to tap into those absentee ballot requests and send reminders to people who are on those lists locally, Joan and Deb can help you do that and really, really want to do that. I've been talking about what Arlington's doing. Many of you probably already know this, but Joan shared this with a group of National League leaders last week. In person, they're going to condos, apartments, civic associations, places of worship. Online, they're doing email blasts via partners. They're writing articles for different publications, including different partner organizations that work with underrepresented voters. I will say in one fell swoop, in a 2-day period, a couple weeks ago, I saw league signs at my farmer's market. I saw a Vote 411 article in my neighborhood newsletter. And I saw Vote 411 information in my parents' condo building in Alexandria. That was all within like 2 days. So I am evidence that this is exactly what the Arlington League is doing, and they are out there and visible. They targeted 23,000 postcards to residents, especially people who had been disenfranchised by the VRA gutting a few years back. They're targeting non-English speakers, including by using multilingual flyers. And they have plans to target people who did not vote in the 2016 election, as well as immigrants in the Arlington area. And again, the VAM data is how you can pretty easily, really simply pull these lists of different groups of people, and then, you know, plan out your activities accordingly. And that's technology that you all can gain access to through the State League. And it's really, really, really powerful. I've talked about a couple of these things already, but these are some of the top tactics. These are the tried and true ways that the research continually tells us we need to do. So we want to be doing any voter contact right now. So before that registration deadline, before we need people to start sending back in their ballots if they're doing mail voting or participating in in-person voting. Again, promoting Vote 411 as the place to go and telling them that's where they can find out who's on their ballot. Asking about a voting plan. You've probably seen many organizations using this idea of a voting plan because that is time and time again shows it's the most effective way to actually increase the likelihood that someone turns out. If you ask someone to think through ahead of time, when will I request that ballot? Or where will I get the stamp to mail it back in? Or am I gonna go to vote before work or on Saturday when I have the day off or after work on election day? Whatever that person needs to do, asking them to think through it really does show a demonstrable increase in turnout. We have to keep it brief and friendly. This is a scary time. It's a scary time, right, for our democracy. It's a scary time to be a voter. It's a scary time to be a person in our country. But time and time again, the research shows that that is actually not the message to lead with when we're trying to encourage voters to participate. We want to be friendly and optimistic and motivational. You have the power to make a difference here. You can be a voter and I can help you. I really want your voice to be heard on election day. Those are the key messages. We're not talking about how terrible certain people are, even in code. We're not talking about how scared we are about the election. Those are all things that we're worried about on the other side of our work, right? And personally, right? On the advocacy side of our work, as we're trying to change our democracy, those are all things that we talk about and that are very real fears and threats. But when we're specifically going out and talking to voters, that is not the message to lead with. So I just want to make that really, really clear. And the research, again, backs that up. And we want to be helpful. So we want to have at our fingertips when we're talking to voters some of this information, or at least know where you can find it quickly. There's a lot of detail, a lot of different dates and processes that even those of us that have done this work for a long time have to be aware of this year. I didn't know how to vote by mail, and I've been doing this work just like you all for a good part of my life. I had to figure that out for my family. And so even people who are very experienced voters have a new process to learn about this year. And then finally, be responsive. So if you're putting your phone number on stuff and sending it out in the community, the league's phone number, I mean, or an email address, this is the time to make sure someone's checking that every day and getting back to people. This is the time to make sure you're not only on social media regularly, but that also checking if people are asking questions on your Facebook post or sending you messages via Twitter to your league and saying, I don't know what to do here. Make sure someone is checking those, being responsive. Make sure in the lead up to election day that you're doing that. If you don't have the means to support that live, in the very least, you can, on your outgoing messages, or your auto reply on the email box, put Vote 411, put the election protection hotline, and I'll tell you what that is in a minute, and some of that information so that voters, don't get stuck, so they have a place to go. So Vote 411, as I've mentioned, I think people are pretty familiar about Vote 411. I just wanted to, again, emphasize it's fully bilingual. It's been fully redesigned. We won a Webby Award earlier this year for Vote 411. We have a growing slew of major corporate partners coming to Vote 411 and wanting to be part of it. I have received so much feedback in the last few weeks that Vote 411 is the best tool out there, and the league team is the best team to work with from corporate partners, from people like Target. We were in a Target ad that started running in the last few days on Hulu. So if you're a Hulu watcher, make sure you watch the Target ad if you see it, because it has a big sign that says Vote 411 on it. And that's because they're a partner using our corporate white label version of Vote 411 this year to help empower their employees and their customers. So Vote 411 just continues to get the recognition it really deserves. We think it's going to serve 10 million voters around the country by the end of the election, which will be far more than we've ever had come through the site before. So I hope we've given people some good ideas. I want to ask, can people just type in the chat something they're going to do? What sort of sparked your interest or your idea during this last kind of half hour here? So what are you going to do? What can you do between now and election day to help encourage? Writing postcards, yes. Sarah says we might try calling voters. Great. Redouble our efforts to get into the apartment building. Super. Trying to reach the immigrant population in Charlottesville. Awesome. Well, I hope we've given you some, get trained on the van and use it. Yes, I love it, Sue. Hand out information at that farmer's market. Check the data at Vote 411. Awesome. Well, great. Thank you, everyone. You're going to go to churches. You're going to go to high rises. You're going to send out postcards. I'm so glad. I'm so glad this gave folks some ideas. And again, I really, Joan and Deb and I at the National League, we are always happy to help talk through these things. And I think the idea is to try something new and see how it goes. And, don't feel like you need to do everything all at once in these last few weeks that are remaining, but try something. I think that's what we'd love to leave you with. So I wanna give people time for questions and sharing, but as I said, I did want to give a couple final updates with the caveat that this could very well change before November. But the top things that we are really worried about internally as a team, and this is sort of meta, talking about the whole country, the signature matching processes that get implemented with mail-in voting is going to be a problem, and it's something that we're clearly very worried about, and something that's been a key piece of a lot of the litigation that the league is bringing. People may not be aware, the National League has really built out our litigation team. Many, many more leagues are doing active litigation than ever before, and that's really important, an important part of our work on the voting rights and advocacy side of things. We had at one point 40 different lawsuits around the country, including in Virginia, around specifically just changes to voting because of COVID. There's still, last I knew, there's still at least 15 of those that need to be decided, and that will change what voters experience in the next, couple of months. So the signature matching and what rules are put in place, how those rules are applied across the board, whether they have standards across the board for how ballots get rejected or not. All of those things are probably top of the list of things that we're concerned about, and doing everything we can to simplify and standardize and make sure ballots don't get unfairly rejected. We know that ballots are rejected at higher rates if people are immigrants or communities of color, or other, from other underrepresented groups as well. And we do not want that to, to be the story here. Clearly the misinformation around Postal Service continues to be a challenge. We are encouraged by the steps that have been taken. We want to continue to support the post office while also encouraging everyone to act early. Last minute changes, as I've mentioned throughout, are going to just continue to impact voters' rights, whether that means, last minute changes to a signature requirement or a notary requirement on ballots, as we saw here in our state, whether that means last minute changes to polling locations because of COVID or other concerns. That was a huge issue during the primaries, and we know it cost people their right to vote. So that'll be a key thing that we're looking at as we head into October. Long lines are going to happen, especially in communities of color and in lower income communities where people have not been able to take advantage of other voting opportunities, and where in-person voting remains a really important and thing that people want to do. We are going to still see problems at those polling places as we traditionally have, and we're going to be really focused on trying to mitigate those in real time. And by we, I mean the whole voter protection community, not just the league. Of course, we remain, concerned that there might be fear or intimidation, certainly confusion, intentional and not, that's put in person on voters and especially online. Clearly, that can't be understated. I hope there was a great webinar that the national team did, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, about this very issue. And there's another one planned for early October. So I really encourage you to listen to that and get some good information about, how we're trying to combat that misinformation. And I have a couple messages in a minute about how we can combat that. And then of course, we know that there will be speculation and fear mongering about the fact that ballot counting is going to take longer. The key thing we can do is say, it's going to take longer this time to count ballots, and that's okay. That's okay. We want to give the process time to work. We want to make sure every vote gets counted. That's really important for us to say when we hear, whether it's from your uncle on Facebook, or from our president, or from an important prominent person in your community, or from a voter who calls and is upset. When we hear that misinformation about the fact that taking time to count the votes somehow means something wrong is going on, we need to combat that in the moment and say, no, actually, we want the process to work, and that means we're going to count and double count if we need to. It's going to take a little bit longer. This is, these are uncharted waters. So I think I've already gone through these. These are kind of some of the messages, and these will look familiar if you were watching at the beginning here. But yes, the best thing we can do is act now. The more people who vote early by mail, the fewer people who are going to be waiting in line on election night. So we can all play that role in helping reduce the crush on our poll workers, on voters who need to vote in person by acting early. It's not just about us acting early, it's about us acting early to make room for the people who won't be able to. We believe in the Postal Service. We believe in the right of people to vote in person if that's what they want to or need to do. We know that the count is going to take longer, and that's okay. And there is help. There's the voter protection hotline, which I'm going to show you right here. This is the voter protection hotline, 866-OUR-VOTE. It's available in multiple languages. It's on every single page of Vote 411. And it's just a key resource, as is Vote 411, as we move into these last critical weeks. In terms of our remaining sort of advocacy priorities, as I mentioned, we're working to maintain viable in-person opportunities for voters who need it. I think that's pretty clear, but happy to answer questions about that. We're hoping to win a bunch more lawsuits. As I said, we have about 15 decisions still pending that will change what voters experience. And that's, speaking nationally. We're trying to internally shore up our support and our rapid response plan. So we are providing, as we did in the primaries, sort of an unprecedented level of state-by-state support so that league leaders like Deb know who to talk to at the national office as they're seeing issues, who to run things up the chain to, and who to get responded by, whether it's a last minute, whether it means that all of a sudden on election morning, 6 of the polling places in Richmond aren't open on time, or we start to hear rumbles that there's a delay in the mail, or that there's a misinformation campaign coming out. Whatever the thing might be, we want to make sure that that people, especially at the state league level, have a way of quickly getting in touch with us, quickly getting our support, whether it be with media, with litigation, with how to respond to something and get good information out to voters. So we're setting up that process. We will have a large election protection operation in the office, in the virtual office, leading into Election Day, as well as participating in the National Election Protection Coalition and hotline that I just showed everybody. We'll be ramping up the training and resources. We're doing far more conversations that are open to all leagues, repeating a lot of the same information, but also making sure that the latest is getting out there all the time. And so hopefully you all read the league update. That's where we put all of the latest information to keep everyone in the loop about what we're doing and what we're seeing and what's available to you for help. And then of course, we fully expect that we will need to intervene in last minute challenges as we go into Election Day, both in the courts, in the media, and sort of on the ground at individual polling places to make sure, every vote gets cast and counted fairly. A couple of big wins we've had just on the litigation side. In Virginia, I think people probably are very aware of the win here about dropping that requirement that people need to have 2 witnesses or a notary on their mail-in ballot. In New Jersey, the league successfully convinced the court to stop rejecting mail ballots based on the signature issues I talked about, because the state didn't have a good mechanism to tell voters if their ballot had been rejected. So we won that. That was a huge win. And again, something that we're fighting in multiple states. And then in Pennsylvania, this one is still pending, but the league was successfully able to intervene and get put into a lawsuit that was originally brought by the administration, trying to create multiple obstacles to the right to vote, including they wanted to get rid of ballot drop boxes in key places across the state. So the league and other voting rights partners intervened and said, there's no basis for this. All this does is suppress votes. That's my non-legal analysis of that, non-lawyer analysis of that one. But that one is still pending. That just gives you again, there were about 40 of these, have been about 40 of these suits around the country that leagues have been at the forefront of fighting. I hope that makes you proud and excited to be part of this organization, because we're on the forefront of fighting for voters right now. I just wanted to highlight a couple of quick partnerships that are really important. I want to call out the NALEO Educational Fund, which is the National Association of Latino elected and appointed officials, has been a critical partner to us in getting Vote 411 translated. National Voter Registration Day remains a really important partnership day. I hope you all are signed up for NVRD on September 22nd. Power the Polls is a great national organization and coalition effort that is helping recruit poll workers around the country, which, as we know, is just a huge need. And then I want to leave some time for questions, so I'm just going to leave here. These are some of the corporate partners that are working with us, mostly by sponsoring Vote 411, but also doing other things with us at the national level. So I hope that's exciting to you. And there's several more that we're going to be making public in the next week or so. So read that league update, follow us on social media, and I'm going to leave up these last tips here. This is the time to be positive and motivational, and I hope that we've helped you think of some ways to do that. So Joan, I think I'm seeing we have about 7 minutes left. Do you want to open it up for questions, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, Deb is going to do the questions.
Oh, okay, great.
So Maggie, a few that you didn't get to as you went through is, how do we access purge voters? And actually we'll get to Marianne about that through Van. How do you find out respectfully if someone is a citizen when you're trying to register them to vote?
I would not try to do that. So
Okay.
if they're,
But if you're in the school and you're trying to register students and perhaps they are undocumented, how do you find that out and still protect them?
So usually what our guidance on something like that would be to say, this is something we're opening up to everybody. Please be aware of those requirements at the top of the form, which includes a citizen checkbox. If you're not sure, or you don't want to turn in this form for any reason, or you want to take it home with you, that's okay. No questions asked, especially in an in-person kind of scenario like that in a school. You certainly don't want to put a student, whether it's based on their status or anything else, in a position of being made visible or embarrassed or pressured, alongside their peers. So we just, we would say, don't actually try to find out that information. Just make these things available to everybody. If anyone says, no, I don't want to do this for any reason, okay, no problem. Keep it light and keep it, friendly. People may have all kinds of reasons for not wanting to fill out a government form, and that is okay.
Another question, and you may have touched on this a little bit, but what sort of resources are available for people who want to do something on election day? What recommendations do you have?
So in terms of on election day, certainly if you are feeling safe and in a lower risk category for COVID, the poll worker issue is just a huge concern of ours. I don't know what you're hearing in Virginia about that. We may well be in a better position than some of the other states. I'm seeing Deb nod. Hopefully that's the case. Certainly the election protection hotline will be looking for support. And it's the National Election Protection Coalition. It's very easy to sign up. They are always looking for experienced people. There may even be Virginia specific election protection activities. I'm not sure. Deb may know better than me, that they're looking for experienced people and lawyers and just election experts like league people tend to be, to help answer voters' questions in real time.
And I have another question. How is Vote 411 being protected from hackers?
So yeah, that's absolutely a huge part of our concern. We have received notice and know that many civic organizations, including specifically the League, have been on lists of top kind of civic sites to target. So there's a really robust system in place. We put the site through an intensive security audit earlier in the year to help identify pain points. We have a full tech team, both internal to League staff and external to the people who help run the site, keeping a very close eye on that and monitoring it all the time. But yeah, it's a reality, and we're doing everything we can to have backups in place, so that it can stay live and serve every voter that needs it.
Well, thank you very much, Maggie. That was all of the questions that we had.
Awesome.
And we really appreciated the great information you imparted to us.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a great event, y'all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, We thank Maggie for joining us at an early hour. Our next speaker is Andrea Miller. She is the Executive Director of People Demanding Action. Andrea is an elections turnout strategist working in voter suppression states. She is the founding board member of the Center for Common Ground, founding tri-chair of the Virginia Poor People's Campaign, outgoing president of the National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia, and the executive director of People Demanding Action. Andrea is a lobbyist at the federal and state level, an IT director, and a political director. So with no further ado, Andrea, it's all yours.
Hi there. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all so very, very much. I am delighted to join you this morning. Let's see. I've got, share screen works. I was going to say I've got a little PowerPoint I want to share with you. We work in what we call voter suppression states. So our main targets this year are all the fun states: Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi. You know, you got to put Mississippi in there as a fun state. North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas. And we are seeing some amazing things in those states. Because I'm a resident of Virginia, we are also doing some things for Virginia. So let me go and get that PowerPoint. Is that it? And yes, that's the one I want. I have a lot of PowerPoints, and it was like, wait a minute, which one do I want? Yeah. And here we are. Let's get that. Let's get that. I am based in Virginia, and like the league, I am a 501c3. So our mission is all about voters. We are not about candidates. We are not about political parties. We are entitled as humans to have our own personal belief, but as an organization, we are here to empower underrepresented voters. And we define underrepresented voters right now as community of color voters: Black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American. The board will be meeting after this election, and we will be looking at including 18 to 24-year-olds of all races in our category of underrepresented voters, because we are looking at representation in elected office. And there is no one more underrepresented in elected office than 18 to 24-year-olds. We run two main campaigns at Center for Common Ground. We run the Reclaim Our Vote campaign, which has seen an absolute insane year. And then our bigger overarching campaign is Let Me Vote, Count My Vote. And in that campaign, we actually do the work to get voters in the door. And then the other side of our campaign is, and once the voters go in the door, we want to make certain that their ballots are counted. And not only counted, are counted as they were intended when the voter cast the vote. We're a little better than most states here in Virginia because we do vote on paper rather than electronic machines. And the other kind of weird thing about our company is we are a technology company, and we invent election technology, and we normally give it away. Courtesy of one of my board members is a retired Google engineer. Now, we are currently involved in a voter registration campaign, and I know some league folks have worked with us because we primarily really work with voters of color, we designed our own line of postcards, and we wanted them to be racially and culturally inspired. So we have power to the people, vote for our lives, and vote your power. The Vote Your Power campaign actually became a poster or a billboard that we actually now have on. There's only 125 college campuses that actually opened. So that billboard is appearing on every college campus in the country that opened, because our millennials and Gen Zers, our 18 to 28, 29-year-olds, they comprise 37% of the voting age population in this country. And right now, they don't vote. So we're going to be doing a lot to inspire them to vote. And yes, I already mentioned our campus billboard campaign. And then down at the bottom, there is a phone number. As I said, we invent technology. So anybody who sees this, they can text VOTE to that 202-937-3351 number. And text bot will say, do you want English? Do you want Spanish? And then it will give them options of what kind of information do they want, and then it will text back. Now, most of our bots are phone bots and text bots, where if you are older, rural, don't have the internet, don't have cellular service, if you call the bot, it will talk to you. If you text the bot, it will text back the answer. We were like, this is a college campus. They've all got cell phones, so we're going to let them text. And then we also have a QR code there. That QR code, people are going, what is that? That's the weird looking thing on the bottom. They can point their camera at the QR code. It will take them to a website, and it will give them an opportunity to create a video saying why they're going to vote. And the millennials gave me a really great hashtag when they were talking about this election cycle. They were like, yeah, we are disenchanted, but we are not disenfranchised. So we aren't really happy about a lot of our electoral choices, but we get it. It's important to vote. So we are really, really focused very, very hard on inspiring young folks to vote, if only for the power of the office. We're reminding them, you're not voting for prom king and prom queen. You are voting for the office of the president and vice president. One of the programs we invented for this year is Text%. I don't know if any of your organizations have bought texting access. I got in trouble with my board member when, on kind of a routine conversation, I mentioned I had spent $10,000 to buy a package of 100,000 texts. And he said, you do know that it only cost half a penny to send a text, right? I said, well, it might cost half a penny, but the programs that let you do it cost a dime. I will never forget, that was a Wednesday. And we had never had a testy conversation before. And that conversation got testy. And he didn't call me the next day. And we normally talk every day. And he called me Friday morning and he said, get your crew together because I have a new program that I'd like to demonstrate on Monday. It is your new texting program where it will cost 1 penny to text. And so this is it, Text%. He designed it to operate purely on a computer screen because he realized most of our volunteers our average age is 58. The other thing is we have grown so large. We have 20,000 volunteers so far this year. We expect to top out at around 30 to 35,000. We have sent 5.4 million postcards and made more than 500,000 phone calls. We intend to send 3 million texts, if not more. And because they're a penny a text, I'm looking at $30,000, not significantly more. So we have X%. Oh, I'd mentioned that QR code. This is what our young people see on the QR code. So we have someone holding one of our postcards, and then we give them some language that actually our Students for Justice put together, and we're telling them we need you to vote your power. We also really share the league's concern about making sure we have enough poll workers. So we are really pressing our millennials and Gen Zers, because in some states you can be 17 years old and go in and actually work the polls. So we are supporting a campaign that we are calling National Vote Force, where we want that new generation to step into the role of being poll workers. Now, again, Virginia votes on paper, but a lot of the states where we work, they brought in these new fancy, even more hackable than the old voting machines they had. And young people, because they were born in the age of technology, are far more comfortable using it. They're less susceptible to COVID. It really makes sense to bring them in and make them a part now of the election infrastructure. Because in 4 years, in 2024, our people that are between the ages of 18 and I'm going to say 40 are going to be between 42 and 47% of the voting age population. We built an app. Again, I've got a Google engineer. Anytime he finds out there's a lot of information and nowhere to comfortably get it all in one place, he feels compelled to build an app. So he built an app where it shows all 50 states, and if they use polls, you can click on a state and it will give you the general rules of what you're going to need to be a poll worker. It will then show you every county in your state where you will find out this is what is required. Now, previously, most counties required that in order to be a poll worker, you actually had to live in the precinct where you were going to work. COVID-19 has changed all that. I know the city of Richmond says, you live in the state, that's close enough. We can work with that. Different counties have different rules. And when you're in this app and you go county by county, you can see the rules the county has. If they have announced what they're paying, you can see that. And if you want to apply, you can click a button and you can apply. And then we built another app that we actually called Vote Force that's available for Android or for Apple users. And what we do with Vote Force, there's not a lot on it right now, but as we get really important election news or information, and organizations can sign up for Vote Force. You can push that information out to everybody that has the Vote Force app, and then they can take that information and then they can share it with all of their users. Probably one of the most important things we are going to have to contribute to this year's election is our election problem reporting tool that we call See Something, Say Something. See Something, Say Something operates on your phone, on a tablet, on a computer, and it allows you to report there's a problem that we are seeing with this election. We've got a lot of people out in big trucks wearing Confederate shirts, and they're all looking really menacing. In the new version of our app, you can take a picture. So along with your report, you can send in a picture, and then your report will automatically appear on a map. And MSNBC runs See Something, Say Something in their war room. Now, every election report is immediately categorized. What kind of issue is it? And is this immediate, meaning it's potentially going to be stopping people from voting? Or is it something that we should know about, but it's, yeah, we want to let people know? Or is it just, we're letting you know this is looking kind of squidgy right now? So that's See Something, Say Something. We have updated our Give a Ride tool. Our Give a Ride tool, people refer to this as free Uber for voting. This is the app that we have for drivers. So the drivers get this app, and then in our phone banks and in our text banks, we ask people, do you need a free ride to the polls? I maintain a corporate Lyft account, so if we don't have a driver, I can dispatch a Lyft. In states and areas where we're going to run Give a Ride, we know all the people who need a ride to the poll. We move them into Give a Ride. The Give a Ride operators then call them, confirm the date and time that they want to go and vote. We upgraded our application this year so that it can support multiple dates for voting. When we originally built it, it was designed solely for election day. Now we can use this for any collection of dates that we want. When a driver is offered a rider, they will see the date and the time that that rider or voter needs a ride. They will also see where they need to pick them up, how many people they're going to be picking up, and is there anything special they're going to need to do for this particular voter. We normally will hire companies that can lift a power chair so that when we do encounter voters who have a power chair, we can send this to the company or companies that are supporting this. And then once the driver confirms, we also, because we have van, we also have, this is where the voter is going to vote. And it is Google Maps enabled, so the driver can get turn-by-turn directions on how to get to the voter's house. And then once they pick up the voter, then they get turn-by-turn directions on how they can get to where they're dropping off the voter. So this is what we have so far for this year. I'm going to stop and take questions. All right, I see people saying
Can I just,
Andrea,
Andrea,
yes.
I just want to say I'm overwhelmed with the amount that your organization is doing. It is incredible, the amount, the numbers of volunteers, the depth, the thoroughness that you have made it easy. If only people will buy in. That group 17, 18 to 29 is going to come out in droves because of you.
Thank you. Well, we hope so. We hope so. Now, again, we're working in some very rural states. we have a billboard campaign going. So not only did we buy billboards on every campus that was open where we could buy a billboard,
Wow.
we will be billboarding rural areas. We will have the standard 17-foot high, 20 by 36-foot billboard. And we only buy digital billboards because we know election information this year is going to change, and it's going to change fast. So we need to be able within 20 minutes, we got to say something else. Put that information there. We will also be partnering with Vote Equality, and we are going to have a giant mobile billboard. We're doing an RV. And so we are going to have the RV traveling through our southern states, and the RV is going to be carrying many mobile billboards where there are 11 by 17 car magnets that say, vote your power. And we're going to have about 300 of those on the RV. So we're going to bring our volunteers out in those states to pick up their free car magnet and slap it on the cars. So I've told all the organizations, these are mobile billboards. I want them on cars. I do not want people taking these home and putting them on the wall.
So Andrea, there are some questions in the chat box. If you'll permit, I'll read them to you.
Yes.
And okay. Will you drive people to locations during the early voting
Yes.
period? Okay, great. And what is the best way to contact your organization for a ride?
We are still working that out because September is going to have such a large time frame. Normally we have a dedicated line that we use for Give a Ride. So we still have that line. We are looking at, are we going to put up something else? Are we going to use radio? We probably will use radio in areas, in more urban areas, so that more people can hear about it, because we are always concerned about our older voters who may not have, quote, the internet and need to hear about it some other way.
And what if you would like to provide a ride? Is there a way for people to sign up to do that?
Yes, and we've realized this year we're going to have to separate the signing up to give a ride from I need a ride. It used to all be the same phone number. And again, it was a bot. And what was great about the bot was when you called the bot would transcribe the call and then send an email. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the bot more sophisticated, and it will say, do you want to give a ride or do you want to get a ride? And so we've got to rebuild out that bot. So yeah, Deepak and his team are going to be, they've been very, very busy this year. And we are now distributing 500,000 postcard addresses a week. We end postcarding October 1st. So we actually had to build a system for that.
That's incredible. Do you have a way to filter the people that offer to give rides or whatever, so that you make sure that voters will be safe?
Yes, we do. We have, I forget what it is. There is a service that we use where we require the driver's license, and then we run the driver's license, and the service comes back and says, yes, go ahead and approve these folks. We also are going to local churches and asking local churches, will they have people, so that we're trying to stay away from this total stranger where we don't know anything at all about these people.
That's good. What provisions are available for visually impaired voters who need a ride?
Voters who need a ride, it's a limited amount of training that we do for our drivers, where if a voter is in any way, shape, or form disabled, our drivers know to go to curbside voting and request that the voting be brought to the vehicle for the voter. And that would include voters on crutches, in wheelchairs, visually impaired, and anything. So if the voter indicates, I'm going to need assistance getting into the vehicle, then it's like, all right, you're going to need to have them bring the ballot to the vehicle. If the voter needs any kind of assistance, we need curbside voting and we need the ballot brought to the vehicle.
Do you have to get insurance in case you have problematic voters or drivers?
Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting conversation this year with our insurance company. It never was before, but I think in 2020, everybody is looking at everything a little bit differently. As long as the insurance companies are able to say that the drivers have been cleared by the company that is reviewing them, then the insurance company is okay. The issue is going to be, it was normally for one day, and they're like, well, we can do anything for one day. Now that we're going to extend it, and I don't think we're going to have give a ride up in Virginia until October, realistically, because the State Board of Elections doesn't currently have all the polling locations available for me to download. Every polling location in the state sits under Give a Ride. And when we recruit drivers, we recruit based on polling locations. We look at what are the ages and the demographics of most of the voters that would be voting there. So we can kind of go, we probably are going to need drivers in these areas. So we are a data-driven organization. I have national van access.
Awesome.
And major shout out to Virginia Civic Engagement Table in Virginia. Yay.
Yeah, we are also a member and they're fabulous.
Yes.
What do you say to a young person who says she's not voting because she feels it'll make no change or difference?
Number one, your vote is so important that there are people spending millions of dollars trying to prevent you from doing it. So your vote really does make a difference. And in Virginia, we lost control of the Virginia State House in 2017 by one vote. Would you have been that one vote?
How are you reaching out to college students who are not on campus?
We geofence. Geofencing is, again, I have a Google engineer. I have learned so much. Even if the students are not on campus per se, they are still connected to the campus through the campus web server. So all of our target states, we looked up the address of every administration building. The web server will be near the main administration building. We found the web servers, and then we will generate content that will go throughout the entire web server system of a campus, reaching students, staff, and faculty, anybody that is connected to that web server. So we geofence.
If someone wants,
and
go ahead.
one more thing, we think, not positive, but it looks like it's going to happen. We're going to have some soccer stars, some hip hop stars that are going to be in our ads. So it will be fun content that we will be able to generate. So young people see it and go, oh, good grief, Cardi B says. Well, we don't know that Cardi B is going to do it, but people that they know who they are. So yes, I mean, we've already, people are saying, what can we do? And we're like, well, we geofence, and you know, we'd like your photograph saying, do this, and then see something, say something, or your photograph and do this, vote early, it's cool, you know, and they're like, oh, we can do that, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What is the best way to get information when you have it available about those phone numbers and how to get connected?
I'm going to say just email me because, and my email is really simple, Andrea@centerforcommonground.org, and I just put it in the chat. Oh, and then how is Center for Common Ground funded? We are basically crowdfunded. Individual people send us checks. We get a few grants, but we are funded by individuals. So we get checks coming in anywhere from $5 to like $25,000. So we've gotten a couple of nice, modest grants, but it's mainly we are people power funded. Now, we do have one special source of funding. We have 123 interns in our Students for Justice program. Open Society came looking for us because they really liked the sound of what we were doing in our program, and they funded us for 123 students. That is the biggest funding we have ever gotten in one place.
That's incredible.
Yes.
Are the drivers allowed to talk about the candidates, or is it a nonpartisan experience?
They are not allowed to talk about candidates, political parties. They can limit their conversation to the weather and non-political movies.
Where can people sign up to phone bank or text bank for you?
All right, and I'm going to say now, if they want to phone bank, only email me and then let me know what state you're interested in. If you want to work in Virginia, because Virginia is no longer a target state, we're a little too blue. I'm setting up phone banks for Virginia, so we'll have special. Actually, we'll put you through our regular training. We do phone bank training every Monday. We run national phone banks every Tuesday and every Friday. I mean, that phone bank team is incredible. They're laying down 23,000 calls a week into North Carolina. I mean, I haven't even looked at what they're doing in other states. So Virginia phone banks are coming online, and the ones that are coming up are going to be early voting because we start voting on Friday. So yes, Chesterfield is already up. Virginia Beach, Chesapeake will be coming up right behind them. And yeah. So anything we do for Virginia, I have to do it. It's extraordinary work. And I have to do it personally because it's sort of outside what the corporation is doing. But we are building some stuff. The most critical and meaningful outreach, she can phone bank, or we are going to be allowing some, we will be text banking in Virginia. We will be texting in Virginia. And so we will do texting, and that will begin very soon because we'll want voters to know Virginia never had early voting before. And people are just not used to that. So we're going to need to let people know that there's early voting. So I've got to buy the cell numbers, and then I'll get all that done. Then National Voter Corps website. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And then,
Andrea, there's one a little further back. What program do you use to text bank?
Text%, the program that we wrote, penny a text. So when I spent $10,000 to buy 100,000 texts last year, $10,000 now buys me 1 million texts.
And there's a question here. Her daughter can't work a poll because of health issues,
Right.
but what other opportunities are available?
Phone bank, text bank. Again, she is a millennial. Ooh, we are dividing all of our text banks into millennial and Gen Zers and old people. It's really funny. My oldest daughter, I was like, you know what? You've aged out of millennial. You're now an old person. She's like, thanks, Mom. She's 40.
How do we acquire signs for early voting to be placed in our yards?
Let me think about that. Early voting. We don't have any early voting signs. Then see, right, that we would have to invent. Yeah, I have no idea how you would get signs for early voting. Well, I mean, and they would need to be Virginia specific signs. So let me go have a conversation with Mr. Print and see what they say. What I will give you is we have phenomenal pricing on our postcards. We stopped sending out addresses on October 1st. So there's still a chance. This is our postcards. This is all of our year, but 5,000 of our postcards are $108 shipped. I mean, it's 2 cents a postcard, and they are beautiful. They are absolutely gorgeous.
Maybe we can talk and we could co-brand a vote early sign.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, and we have an automatic distribution address system. I can load some Virginia. We already have some voter registration lists that are loaded where you can merely go to the postcard system, put in a distributor address, and then say, give me X number of addresses and a script, and then 5 minutes later, the postcard system mails it back to you. I know we've set the Liberal Women of Chesterfield, and I believe maybe a couple of League folks in Chesterfield up with that system. So that's Virginia specific. I got my own because we couldn't use the big national system for Virginia. So it's like, okay, then I need my own.
Well, I know that you've been working with Joan to get out postcards, and she's been farming those out to other area leagues too.
Yes,
so
yes.
That's been a great
and again, you want to
program.
write League of Women Voters on it, that's just fine. We are very, very agnostic in Virginia. So it's, we needed to put somebody's name on the script. So I think on the script we'll say, you can substitute organizational name. So as long as it's nonpartisan, we are good. We can't have people saying, vote for Biden. No. We want people to vote. We aren't going to tell them who to vote for. It's about voting.
Absolutely. There are no more questions in the chat box. Does anyone have some more questions that you've thought of that you haven't typed in yet?
Great. Yeah, I think I have Chesapeake. I'd have to go look and see what's in the postcard system, but I think I've got some Chesapeake, maybe some Norfolk, and some Chesterfield addresses for voter reg that are still sitting up in the postcard system. And I can maybe get a couple of other groups up there for voter reg. And then we want to do GOTV. You can go early.
So are you looking for people to contact you to pick up those unclaimed things sitting in your van?
We don't have the van yet. We have to buy the RV. There are none available for rent. People apparently don't want to stay in hotel rooms, so they all ran out and rented RVs. What the board figured out is based on what we were going to spend to rent the RV, by buying it at the end of the election, we would have an RV as opposed to nothing. So they were like, buy it. It's like, okay. So yes, and one of my board members immediately offered to buy it from me. And then other board members were like, well, wait a minute, the board, we might want to rent it. So I'm going to go in the RV rental business with my board members. What? Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a year where every one of us, we need to be all in with everything else that we can do. And yes, Joan, we do have more postcards that can be written. We just got a gift from the North Carolina State Board of Elections. They gave us the list of all the voters they purged. Yes. Yeah. So we will be postcarding those voters saying, hey, you have been removed from the rolls by the North Carolina Board of Elections. This is not you may have, you have been. So plan on registering and early voting, or you're going to need to re-register. So yes, yes. So boards of elections, there are some very, very good people in boards of elections. I even developed a friend in Texas. Oh, one of the things about our texting tool, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas all use vote centers for early voting, meaning you can vote anywhere in the county. Actually, Virginia kind of now has vote centers as well. We just call them satellite voting. One of the problems for older voters is they have no idea where these satellite vote centers or vote centers are. So our tool, our texting tool, when a voter tells us I'm going to early vote, it automatically looks up the closest early voting center to them, sends them the name, the address, the dates and times that vote center is open. Because in most of our other states, there's no rhyme, reason, or consistency as to why location A is open on these dates and location B isn't. And we also, if they are a voter ID, photo ID state, we also text them the photo ID requirements card. So we built a tool that would help us take and handle any pain point that our older, more rural, or even younger voters might have, because just because you have the internet doesn't mean you're efficient at using it. You would contact Roxanne. So anybody who wants to get in on the new North Carolina list, yes, email me, and then I will contact Roxanne, who is the Virginia distributor, so that Roxanne will know she can order some of those North Carolina addresses and get them into Virginia. Yes. And
There are
now
two.
in North Carolina, we are also going to need some texters. I have 700,000 cell phone numbers that I got for North Carolina. I know.
Andrew,
It's like,
if someone wishes to text bank for you,
yes.
are they using their own cell phone number, or does your program allow them to use an anonymous number?
Our program is a totally anonymous number, and they text from their computer, not their phone. So yes, that was another thing that concerned people. And you're going to love this. If you've ever done any text banking, you know that occasionally some of the replies can get amazingly colorful, where people ask you to do illegal things with your mother. And you're like, oh, not even being able to figure out how that would work, but whatever. So what we have done is we have 2 text statuses. You can be on new text only, which allows people younger than 18 to text. Think our young people sitting for their bar and bat mitzvahs. And it also allows for the older church ladies to safely text. So we can put people on the new team, and we can have people on the reply team. Now, reply team people, we are going to teach you election law in the state where you're texting. So there's going to be a lot more required. But on the new texting team, you'll log in, you'll get your new message, you'll get a voter, and then you're going to just press send, and then you're going to just get your little rhythm going and enjoy it. We did a trial in Virginia because Virginia, we had to look up precincts. People texted off 38,000 people in one day. They're like, is there more? No, I thought 38,000 people might take you 4 or 5. No, there's no more. This was the test.
Did you say that there are people in Norfolk and Chesapeake still needing to get postcards?
Yes. Yes, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and quite probably Virginia Beach. And then if you want to text, just email me. I mean, you folks are all Virginia folks. You're going to get special treatment. Just email me.
Thank you. And are you doing anything to help the voters in Newport News?
I have the Newport News list. I can look and see if that list has been loaded. If not, I will get that list loaded because I know I have it.
And how about Portsmouth?
Yes, Portsmouth is another one that I have. Yes. Okay, now there was a question about security. We can read every text that was sent. And we don't read all of them, but we do read all the replies.
And there's one about an unaffiliated person in Georgia. Is there a good way for her to get involved?
Yes. Have her email me and she can let me know what she wants to do. Georgia will also have texting. Georgia hasn't announced their polling locations yet, so we can't really bring that up until we know where we're going to tell people to go vote. Oh, and one of the other things that we do in our target state is we map all the polling locations, the early vote locations, and if there are drop boxes in the state. And once those maps are done, those maps are included in our texting and also in our phone banks. So yes, Deepak in his spare time makes maps. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. So yes, we are very, very concerned about security, and our maps are in S3 maps for the federal government. Oh, and our target states are Alabama, can't spell Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas. As I said, the fun states.
Those sound like the pre-clearance states.
Yes, they all were. They all were. One of the things that the board required was that we look at states where the voting age population was at least 20% people of color. No, I love that Wisconsin. No, the odds of us ever being able to work in Wisconsin is 6% community of color. We have to look statewide because we're doing statewide elections. And then, yes, what about intimidation at the polls? What is it? 4 Directions, the affiliation of a coalition of tribes came to DPAC, and for See Something, Say Something, they had him build in the ability to take a short video and the ability to take a photograph and then have that embedded and sent when they post on the map. And again, remember, we can then go into the map, see that, and then immediately flag it to MSNBC and say, you're going to want to get a reporter out there on that right away. We may also send a message back and say, have you called law enforcement? Depending upon what that intimidation looks like. So yes. I mean, in states like Georgia and Florida, the intimidation could be coming directly from the government. Now, here's another big concern we have that I will tell the league. One of the things that we are working out how we're going to tell voters, and we'll probably do it on billboards and through our bots, is that the electronic poll books are probably going to be hit. And so what we are suggesting that people do is twofold. Number one, contact your county board of elections. Do they have a paper backup of their poll book? There is no law that says they must, but being concerned about security says they should. Now, we are also telling voters, go online, check your voter registration status, take a picture of it with your camera because it should say your name, your address, and you are active. It is illegal to purge voters after August 6th unless they have been found guilty of a felony. No one can be removed from an active voter registration. All right, so it's frozen as of August 6th. So if you've got a photograph of your active voter registration as of September, somebody has messed with their poll book. And they need to go to paper.
So there was a law passed in Virginia July 1st that does require paper poll books now, especially because of what happened in Virginia Beach. I guess that was June, that they did not have a paper poll book, and there was a problem with the software for the electronic poll book. So we do have that now in
Again, it's a
Virginia.
new regulation. Is your county following it?
We would hope they're following the law. What about intimidation at the polls? Is there an outreach for to Indigenous people?
Oh, yes, yes. As a matter of fact, the Indigenous people came and did the outreach to us. They were like, we like see something, say something, but we want to be able to take a video and take a picture. So we added that for 2020.
And how do people access See Something, Say Something?
There will be a new link, and we will generate a bit.ly link. It is still under development, so we haven't generated the bit.ly because the tool we're using, when we change things, it changes the link. So once we stabilize this, and I told Deepak, we really have to have it by next week. I will get it out to the league, and then you can disseminate it. We will have it in our scripts. We will move it into virtually everything that we do that is GOTV. So we will put it out on VoteForce.
Are there any other questions? Well, Andrea, thank you so much. This has been very informative, and we appreciate all. Oh, there's one question here. If you're a poll worker, does anyone know if we're allowed to say see something, say something? Heather, I've had conversations with the Commissioner of Elections to make sure that poll workers do know. So if you're a poll worker, you need to send them to your chief. But we've asked the Commissioner of Elections to make sure that that election chiefs know what the rules are and how to handle any sort of problems. And we want that to be coming from the local election offices as well.
Okay. All right. Do you want me to use file and put my PowerPoint up there?
Joan, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, you can, but can you also send it to me so that we can send it out to people?
Oh, most definitely. Yes, 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 yes. All righty. Yes, yes.
We are asking all the speakers, by the way, to share their PowerPoints with us so that we'll be able to send them out to everyone.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
righty. Okay, I am loading up right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been
sending to you as well.
awesome. This has been very informative, and thank you so much. Very impressive, very exciting.
Yes, yes. 2020 will be an election for the history books. We all know this. Notice the smile on my face.
I love it.
Take care, everybody. I'm
Thank you so
helping
much.
my daughter buy a house, so I've got to go do that now.
Well, thank you so much. She has aged out, hasn't she?
This actually, yes, even my youngest daughter has aged out. She's 29.
Well, thank you so much.
You are very, very welcome. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Enjoy your day.
I will.
So we are going to take a little break. Joan, how many minutes do we have before we come back?
We have about 6. Let's do 6.
Okay, so we will take a little 6-minute break, and don't delay too long, because when we come back, we're going to hear about statehood for DC, and that's a matter of representation without, or they're not getting to vote for their representation. So see you in just a few. So Joan, is it time?
Mhm.
Okay, great. I'll let you introduce Anne when you're ready.
Had a little finger failure there, trying to put my video on. Okay, our next speaker is from across the Potomac. Her name is Ann Anderson. She is the chair of the League of Women Voters of the District of Columbia Committee for Full Rights for DC Citizen. And she is showcasing the new presentation that they are going to roll out with up-to-date information on their progress in DC statehood. Those of us who are in the Northern Virginia area know how hard the DC League has been working for DC statehood. So right now she's going to share the new program, discuss their issues, and give feedback as to how we can help our friends in DC finally get representation. Ann?
Thank you, Joan. I really appreciate this invitation. You know, this is literally the first time I'm presenting this. So thank you very much. And right at last night, I realized I wasn't going to be able to use polls because I'm on your Zoom. So I now have a different kind of thing. Fortunately, we're recording this. So I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing people respond by putting things in chat, even though we won't be able to go through and find out, you know, like the percentage of what and what. But indeed, Washington, D.C. League has been working for 100 years, we've been working on this. But in the last several years, we've been going around to 30 states and Hong Kong, talking to leagues, and we have really been working very hard. So what I would like to do now is to share my screen. Can I do that, Joan?
Yes.
All right. Let's see. Here we go. I'm not being able to see what I'm doing here. So let's just take a look here. There we go. Okay. I'm hoping you're seeing Fixing the Hole in Our Democracy, DC Statehood.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
good.
Fabulous. Okay. So this is, you know, in fact, thanks to the League of Women Voters Education Fund, National has been amazingly supportive and helped us out a lot. And of course, this is a DC Democracy grant. So why are we doing this presentation? Well, history's been made this year. We actually have a Washington, D.C. Admission Act that's passed the House of Representatives. And the act, as of yesterday or 2 days ago, has been moved to the Senate floor for the first time ever. And of course, we know about the centennials that have really, you know, shown a major light on DC's lack of voting representation. And this is a unique congressional control over DC's laws and budget. And then, of course, we have our survey of attendees at the National Convention because we wanted to see just how we were doing. And in fact, we found that the level of information that people know about our education has been working, but there's still some pieces of information that have not been clear. Now, you guys have been on Zoom all the way along here, so I'm not going to do all this but that's what I would usually do if I were running the Zoom. But here we go. We're going to identify the historical background to DC's situation. We're going to recognize the major impacts of not having statehood, because one of the things I find when I've gone around the country is just how people just don't really understand. And then we're going to talk about concrete actions to do it. So let's just jump in. So this would be a poll, but I want you to take a look. What do you think? Have we never had representation? Did we lose it when the Virginia side went back to Virginia? Was it in 1801 with the Organic Act? Was it 1789 when the Constitution was adopted? Could you all just quickly put a, which one do you think in the chat so that later on I can look at the recording and find out what people knew before this presentation? That would be really helpful. So if you can take a minute and just give me a sense of what you think. When did it happen? I can see you guys are moving right along here. I'm delighted. Thank you. I'll give you another, 30 seconds to answer, and then we'll move on. Because I'm going to give you an answer, actually, in the next slide. So. Okay, let's move right on here. So in 1801 is when we lost it. That's when DC had the Congress move into itself and pass the Organic Act. Up till then, there'd been 10 years where DC was actually in place, but people from Virginia still voted in Virginia congressional and presidential elections, and people in Maryland still voted in Maryland elections. And then Congress moved in, and from one day to the next, we were disenfranchised. But from the beginning, the founders expected self-government and local and future representation. In fact, in the congressional debates that you could read in the congressional record, there were lots of people who were concerned about, wait, we've made them a set of subjects rather than citizens again. But Congress kept total control, and in fact, in 1846, gave Virginia's side of DC back to Virginia. So they shrank DC, which was really an important, turned out to be an important thing here. And over 70 years, they tried a whole variety of things, and we were even a territory for a while with a governor and legislative houses, and then they realized they didn't want that for a whole bunch of reasons, including a good set of racist reasons, and they abolished that government, which is what they can do. They could abolish our home rule government right now. And for nearly 100 years, DC was governed by 3 appointed commissioners, 2 civilians, 1 Army, and we say Army because it was the Army Corps of Engineers, because they really needed the help in managing water. Then finally, during the Civil Rights era, we got the 23rd Amendment ratified. And so DC residents voted for president in 1964, which is the first year that I actually became a DC resident and the first time I was able to vote. And it was an amazing experience to watch people coming out of the polling place going, I voted. I actually voted. In 71 was when we finally got a non-voting delegate to Congress. And then in 73, we got our limited home rule. We can elect a mayor and a 13-member council, but Congress still retains authority over all legislation and our budget. So we look like a state. We have a mayor who acts like a governor. We have a council. We have a legislature. We have a judicial. But how many legislators do you have? And if somebody, you know what? I actually don't know. How many legislators do you have? Can somebody say that? And then what's our next one? We have 13, by the way. We have 1 for every member coming from every ward. And then we have 5 at large. And so who approves your legislation? My bet is it's your governor, right? Governor has to sign. Well, our mayor signs, but then our legislation is confirmed by Congress. And how are your state judges appointed? Please, throw in how do you get state judges? Well, we have judges that are appointed by the president. And so most of our judiciary is actually federalized. So we operate under different rules. So let me just give you a few highlights or lowlights of our situation. Congress regularly tries to impose pet projects. And here are just a few. I could go on for 2 hours here, but never mind. For instance, they prevented needle exchange for several years, so DC ended up with the highest HIV/AIDS infection rate in the nation. The couple of years that we were able to do needle exchange, lo and behold, the infection rate dropped by, I think, nearly half. DC is prevented from using its own tax dollars to fund low-income women who need abortions. Regardless of how you feel about the issue of abortion, this is a question about local control, because DC's tax dollars that are raised by DC are still subject to what Congress wants us to do with it. And then, of course, the latest is when DC was treated as a territory in the COVID relief bill. I mean, usually DC is treated as if it were a state, probably in over 500 times every year, especially for distributing block grants. DC is treated as a state, but in the COVID relief bill, the CARES Act, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, they shorted our funding by $750 million by saying, no, you're not a state, you're a territory. And DC has still not been made whole. The Congress made us whole, but that act is currently languishing in the Senate. So these are all ways that actually affect people's lives. People die because of how Congress treats us. We're subject to all the laws, policies, procedures, appointments in the House and Senate, but we have no vote on Supreme Court justices, no vote on treaties in war, no vote on how taxes are spent. But by the way, we pay the highest per capita rate in the country. So here's another quick poll, and you see here's the poll idea. But what's the worst thing about not being a state? Now, what I really want here is for you to just give me your gut level response, because what we're looking is what's the best way to help people understand this. So I'm going to give you a list, and if you could just again put, your response, what's the worst thing? And maybe you've thought of something else too. Well, go ahead and put it in too. But I'll be really interested in being able to read the chat, because these are the kinds of things that we continually have to deal with. And basically we run our government, our local self-government, supposedly always looking with our, eyes over our shoulder, like, well, but how's that going to fly? So this is great. Thank you so much for all of these good responses. I'm really looking forward to seeing them. This will be extremely helpful to our process. All right, I'll give you another couple seconds because it seems like you're still moving along. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So let's move to statehood. Where are we in the process? Well, between '85 and 2016, there were 6 statehood bills introduced. And then after that, admission acts have been introduced in Congress every year, and sponsorship has grown each year. And then in 2016, we voted overwhelmingly to petition for statehood with a new constitution, boundaries, all the things that you need. And this year, as I mentioned, HR 51 passed the House, and the Senate bill has now been placed on the Senate floor. So let's just review quickly how you get new states into the Union. Well, Congress does it. And by the way, a single state can't create a new state within its borders. So for instance, California could not split itself into 3. And let's remember that not all lands owned or controlled by the state, by the US are states, they're territories and national parks, forests. So Congress does need that, and we can talk about the territories like Puerto Rico at some point, but I'm focusing on DC right now. And by the way, when you put a new state, you add a new state, they're equal to those of existing ones immediately. So there's no caveats included. And all but the original 13 were admitted to the Union by a majority vote, and then the president signed it. So here's another question for you. What do people say about DC statehood, if it's talked about at all? Again, we're looking for what's it like out there? If anybody comes to say DC statehood, what's the response? How do things work? And again, I'd love to, know what you all are hearing, because those things will be very helpful to us. And if anybody wants to say something at this point and say it out loud, that's fine with me. I'm just not wanting us to take a lot of time.
I lived in several different states, and except for league members, where I've always been a member of the league, most people don't know what it is. Somebody once asked me when I was on a cruise, "Oh, is that the Tea Party?" So.
Yeah, okay, that's very helpful. Those are the kinds of things, and that's what we keep running into. When I travel around the country, people say to me, "So do you actually live in DC?" And these are actually league members who ask me if I'm living in DC, if I'm a member of the DC League. So, people clearly trying to get their heads around the fact that there are actually 700,000 plus people who actually live within the bounds of the district. When most people think, of course, of DC as the mall, the White House, the Capitol, and that's what they see on TV. And, they don't come to my house when they're visiting DC. So.
And I'm a good friend of one of the big supporters, Kathy Schmidt.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Kathy has been a stalwart. I mean, She's been amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So thanks. I look forward to seeing all those things in the chat. And we'll move on. Let me just run through a few normal things that happen when there are objections to DC statehood. So is it constitutional? Yes, it is. Because in the bill, the current bill, there's still a federal district that Congress has complete control over as mandated by the Constitution. It's just smaller. And Congress already reduced the size by sending everything back to Virginia that was from the Virginia side in 1846. As you all well know, if they hadn't done that, Northern Virginia would still be part of DC. So, this is the issue, that nobody is going to lose our nation's capital. It's still going to be there, and Congress is still going to have complete control over it. So does it need a constitutional amendment? No. All states after the first 13 were admitted by majority vote of both houses and the signature of the president. There's nobody that's had to go through a constitutional amendment to get added to this union. So here's a really important question for leagues, because I have already been asked, you know, how come you're promoting a partisan issue here? Well, you know, the league has been working on full representation, I mean, the DC League since 1920, and when we were founded, and the National League has been supporting this since 1938. It's not a partisan issue. People are making partisan comments about it, but the lack of full representation in both houses of Congress is voter suppression, big time. Actually, DC Vote said, this is the oldest form of voter suppression that we have since the Constitution was founded. And it's a civil and a human rights issue. Human rights commissions around the world have dinged the United States of America for how they're treating their nation's capital's residents. So that's where we are with that. And then finally, is DC too small? Well, the geographical proportion between states was decided in the Constitution with the big state, small state, Senate, House representation division. We're bigger than 2 states and on par with 6 in terms of population. We have 700, and I think the last count I saw was 702,000 people who are disenfranchised. And that's serious voter suppression. And so why hasn't statehood passed? Because that's another thing I often get a question. Well, why, if this is so terrible, why haven't we taken care of it before? Well, I think a critical issue is DC residents are not constituents. So if you imagine you're gonna go, you know, to your congressman, your, you know, meet and greet, and your candidate is gonna say, well, I'm for DC statehood. Well, somebody living in a Virginia district is going to say, what does that have to do with me? How are you going to take care of me and my issues? And so it doesn't seem very productive to congressmen, or, you know, who are trying to get reelected or getting elected. It's just not something that's going to come up unless, of course, they have constituents who ask about it. So, and then there's this other difficult and ugly thing, which is that racism has had a really bad influence. When DC has been for a good time a majority Black district, it's still a majority minority district. So I think racism is still at issue. But you know, the real question is, what do we do next? Then, of course, there's the issue of partisanship. You know, people are worried that we'll get 2 more Democratic senators. And of course, right now, I can well imagine that that would be true. However, number one, do you really deny representation in your national legislature because of how somebody might vote? That's partisan voter suppression. And number two, let's remind ourselves of Hawaii and Alaska that were brought in supposedly to be a Democrat and a Republican state, and they have switched. So we, in fact, have no idea, having no crystal ball, what DC will look like 10, 15 years from now as a state. So, and then this other very sort of political thing that I think happens, both parties have used DC to make points at home on issues that don't affect their constituents because they can. So here we go. What should we do next? What can you do to help? So we need your feedback. What's this presentation like? Please type suggestions into the chat. if you have questions, please type them into the chat, or, you know, I don't know how you guys have been doing it, raising your hands or something. Let me know what it's like. We're almost done. I'm going to have one more set of things to ask you about.
We have about 3 minutes left.
Yep, that's just about right. So here are some concrete action suggestions. Talk to friends and neighbors about DC statehood. You know, like as Elizabeth said, you know, most people don't know. So just talking will help. We have postcard mailers that we can get to you that you can write. It has a little bit of things about DC statehood. We can contact community leaders about statehood. You can invite us to give a presentation to your group. And then let us know what questions about DC come up. I'll show you my email here. It's very simple. I mean, basically now, just to summarize, we've done a historical background and we've recognized the major impacts of not having statehood, and we've listed concrete actions. So here's what we're going to do. I don't think we have to send a summary email because I'm going to send you this whole thing, but you can link to the DC Statehood Toolkit, which has what I'm calling a resource-rich PowerPoint. And this is a condensed and highlighted version of that, and of course an updated one. And then there's how you can reach me, statehood@lwvdc.org. Thanks.
Anne, thank you so much. Are there ways that you would like us to, do you want us to contact you? I know that the League does support this, and what would be a good step for Virginia to lend support?
Well, I have been finding that our postcard mailers have really been getting major response rates. And what it is, it's a 2-card mailer, so that you get to put your address, the address of your friend on the outside, and then the inside, they can tear off the postcard and write that they support statehood. I mean, they can just sign their name and put their zip code. They don't even have to put any big, you know, information, and then it sends it back to me, you know, and we're gathering those so that we can have a huge level of, they become part of our petition supporting statehood. And we've had like a 15 to 20% response rate. I haven't counted recently, but it's been very effective. So if somebody wants to write me at DC at statehood@lwvdc.org, I'll be happy to get them any number of postcards, because of course we have a bunch that have been sitting here while we try to get them out in this issue of COVID. Blah. So thank you, that would be useful.
Okay, and someone put in the chat box, how do they get a DC statehood button?
Ah, yes, a DC statehood button. Write me, I'll send it to you. Give me your address. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, Anne, thank you so much. Appreciate it. So we are going to take a lunch break, and you have 2 options. You can have lunch away from your computer, or go for a walk, or whatever you'd like to do for your little break. We're also going to put everyone into a break room, and you have an option of saying yes, and you can go into that break room and have your lunch there and chat with whoever's available, or you can just ignore it and then just meet us back here at no later than noon, because then we have Kelly McFarland talking about leadership, and we'll have Becky Lawson talking about positions and how that impacts advocacy. So let's get everybody into a breakout, and we will see you back at noon. And Joan, I may need to turn it over to you to do that.
Okay. Yeah, if you don't want to be in the breakout, just don't accept the little box that pops up on your screen. Okay. Got it. Okay, again, if you want to chat with a member, just accept the little box on the screen. If you don't, just ignore it. We'll close all the rooms at noon when we come back. Thanks.